y oportunidades reales para
no
todos
pestañea el
los
mirón.
argentinos.
Este es el nivel que tenemos. Este es el nivel que tenemos.
This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek in Pacifica, and there have been some important developments in Argentina with the Milei government and the struggle of working people in Argentina against the privatization and massive attacks on the working class trade union or press in Argentina. And joining us is Guillermo Kane. He is a member of the Workers' Party, a professor at the University of Buenos Aires, and also was a former representative in the Buenos Aires Parliament. Welcome to our show, Guillermo.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here.
So, Guillermo, why don't you talk about the recent developments, but also the ongoing privatization and attacks on the working class in Argentina by the Milei government?
We're near 2 years of the Milei government, and it's an unprecedented level of attacks against the working class on all levels, both wage levels, advances in lowering the budget, budget cuts, or directly shutting down important public services, and different ways of state subsidizing to, for example, cultural production. It's really been a generalized attack on working people and the oppressed all along the country. The interesting thing now is that the situation is becoming more and more complicated for the Milei government on all fronts. So on the one hand, there are some conflicts which, despite the trade union bureaucracy's strategy of isolating conflict and saying that opposition to Milei has to be purely electoral or parliamentary, some conflicts have maintained their stance over many months and have gained mass support despite the trade union bureaucracy's politics of isolating them. And then there are several of them, but particularly this year, the pediatric hospital of a national pediatric hospital in the city of Buenos Aires, the Garrahan Hospital, which has a level of complexity in the medical treatments it gives, which is unparalleled not only in our country but in several of the neighboring countries. So it's a very important hospital. The children travel from, in some cases thousands of kilometers to come to get attention, and which has been dreadfully cut in its budget and in its wages. So what's happening there in the national universities and many other places is very qualified workers are sometimes having to leave their jobs or even leave their countries because of the real wages have been cut down tremendously. So they've been in a long conflict, which has had a very strong public support with mass demonstrations, with artists and figures from the Argentine culture coming out in support of the workers. And a similar thing is going on in the universities. We've had a very long conflict with strikes of 1 week, of several days, with public teach-ins with students, blocking streets and marching. Our wages, for example, university professors, have been effectively cut to half of what they were when the Milei government started in regards to inflation, the real value of our wages. And there have been some ridiculous cosmetic increases of like 5% or things like this, which would quickly lose. They're not enough to buy 3 things at a market. Recently, what happened is a sort of perfect storm for the Milei government. It suffered electoral defeat in a local election in the province of Buenos Aires in early September. Many of the bourgeois opposition who had been very collaborationist with the Milei government in the parliament, since they did not reach electoral agreements with Milei, and he insisted on running his own ballot in many of the provinces against local governors who had been collaborationists with his government. The parliament shifted against him on many topics. And these these popular struggles and some others gained vast popularity. Another one, for example, is that of handicapped people, whose subsidies and the state funds to have professional accompaniment and treatment have also been cut, rendering it impossible for them to attend to the different situations of disabled or handicapped population. So they've also been doing very important demonstrations, like also the pensioners, both going up against police repression. So this has touched a very sensitive point with thousands of people. So you had these struggles, the parliamentary defeat of Milei, and the electoral defeat, and in parliament, several laws which translated, at least partially, these demands were passed. So a law rising the university budgets and wages, a law rising the pediatric hospital wages and budget, and laws in favor of handicapped people and pensioners. Milei vetoed these laws, and unlike last year in similar situations, the parliament overturned these vetoes. So last week we had a situation where 200,000 people were demonstrating here in Buenos Aires around the Congress, the national parliament, when the vetoes regarding the pediatric hospital and the university were overturned, saying it's a legal necessity or obligation, actually, for the federal government to make these wage increases. What's going on now?
Well, before that, I saw the video of the rallies.
Yeah.
It was on live channel 5, I think, and it was amazing. The whole parliament, they had a big screen up in front. All these workers, we had come to Buenos Aires to demand that this law be passed, overturning Milei's veto of it. It was quite a bringing together of workers who were angry, and following that, it seemed like there was tremendous spirit that they beat Milei.
Oh yeah. It was that day. It felt like a big victory on the streets. Actually, Steve, I have to tell you, those 200,000 people were basically from the Buenos Aires area, and there were important demonstrations throughout the country. So it's not a national demonstration. It would have been much bigger. But yeah, that was a very important feeling of a coming together, and it wasn't just the university workers. There were a lot of unions, of different sectors, of workers of the private sectors and so on. Also, the student movement was present, and in general, different sectors of workers in opposition to the government coming together. So that was very important.
And the Peronist party apparently has now captured more votes taken away from Milei's support, as well as the left in Argentina.
Yeah, they won in the province of Buenos Aires by a much larger percentage than was expected. Milei, who absorbed the other right-wing party, the Macri's party Pro, lost millions of votes in regards to the second round of presidential election 2 years ago. Millions of votes. A lot of those votes probably abstained or stayed home. Some might have gone over to Peronism, and the left grew in regards to the last elections and that local election. So now there will be national parliamentary elections in October. We'll see how that comes out. It says a month to go for these general national elections, but some surveys are talking about interesting votes. An interesting amount of votes for the left, possibly voting in several new national congressmen of the Left Unity Front, which, in our case, in the Workers' Party, we're playing a big role also in these conflicts. So we will, of course, use these new parliamentary spaces, if one, to agitate for the class struggle and for the demands, and for a political solution for the deep crisis our country is in. No, but some of these surveys are saying between 10 and 14% of vote for the left in the city of Buenos Aires, which will be very important, and between 6, 7, or 7 in the province of Buenos Aires. We'll see if this, becomes a reality. In the recent election in the province of Buenos Aires, the general average of vote for the left was between 4 and 5%, but in some cities, like La Matanza, a very important working class district with 2 million inhabitants near the city of Buenos Aires, we were close to 8% of the vote. So I think it was an important election for the left. This expresses, a combative spirit in a sector of the working class. And the other thing I want to tell you, Steve, and I'm sure you've seen this in recent news, is the economy is the other big crisis here. Milei's economic scheme just cannot be maintained. There's a strong pressure, even from sectors of the local bourgeoisie, to devaluate the peso, and he has already spent all of the dollars, the millions of dollars from the IMF.
Propping up the currency. Wasn't there a run after that election?
Yeah, that's what happened. So he spent all of the money that the IMF had given him about 3 months ago, and the peso went from 1,300 and something to 1,500 in a week. And now it's gone down a bit because Trump and Bessent have said that they will give the Milei government all the dollars it wants. There's no clarity to what the conditions that the Trump administration is demanding, be they in terms of military support, in terms of control of natural resources, or other sorts of conditions that we've clearly seen Trump put on the table when intervening in other conflicts or situations. So, not just the revolutionary left, but even bourgeois opposition or mass media are commenting that Milei, to try to not devaluate before these elections in October and try not to be defeated or to have that big an electoral defeat, is condemning us to some form of renewed colonial oppression, the characteristics of which are still not clear, but which are at the center of this agreement with Trump that has been at the top of not only Argentine media, but internationally, that the Milei government is going downhill fast, and Trump is is agreeing a big spending bill to try to prop him up.
And Milei had said when he came into office, he wasn't going to trade with communist China. He wasn't going to trade with any communists. Apparently now he's selling more soybean to China, and they're refusing to buy soybean from the United States in the trade war that Trump has launched. So apparently this trade with China is growing in Argentina. At the same time, he's taking loans from the United States to stay in office.
Yeah, that sort of ideological rhetoric was not really able to be maintained, and important sectors of the Argentine bourgeoisie considered it ridiculous to lose trade with China in particular. China is, of course, the main commercial destination for not only Argentina but Brazil and many of the countries in the region. So it means deciding to not commerce for ideological reasons means giving up space to their immediate rivals in the region, for this commerce. So this is something that even during the presidential campaign, Milei had to step back a bit from. They've also gone to China to try to assure the possibility of using a swap in renminbi that the Cristina Kirchner government had agreed on with China. So really, to try to not fall into default.
He did a flip flop. He did a big flip flop.
Yeah, it's a big flip flop. But the thing about it is, we're probably not seeing the end of the story, because we still have to see what the conditions that the Trump government will put on Milei in this regards, because we're seeing a big struggle for the influence between the main capitalist powers of our day in Latin America, where China has made important inroads. Of course, there's a big presence of European capital as well, but it is clear that the aggressive sort of policies which the tariffs of the tariff policies of Trump are a part of, have to do with fighting for this influence in the region. So we can't think that the millions Trump is promising to Milei this week during his visit in the States will not come with some dispositions regarding how to fight Chinese influence. I mean, the envoys of the U.S. government who have been here, and the ambassador, for example, that they named here, a guy called Peter Lamlas, have been very clear about their interest in closing off the possibility of deals regarding natural resources in Argentina, like lithium, and the need for them to go to the U.S. and not China, and this to be the main point of their intervention. Also, there is a satellite station, a Chinese satellite station in the province of Neuquén, which they want to close down. They want to open up, and Milei has agreed, a new naval station of the U.S. in the extreme south of the continent, in the Tierra del Fuego province. So these sort of things are definitely on the agenda as well.
And of course, the United States now is moving to possibly invade Venezuela. They're blowing ships up in international water, Venezuelan ships. They're rebuilding military bases in Puerto Rico, and which is a colony of the United States, and moving to military armada off the coast of Venezuela. What's the response of people of Latin America, the unions and workers, to this open threat of the United States government to basically overthrow the Maduro government?
We have to be absolutely categoric in rejecting the presence of the U.S. Navy in the Caribbean, rejecting their destruction of ships, whatever they claim that they were drug trafficking ships or whatever, is absolutely unproved claim. And even if they were, they have no right to destroy ships and kill people as if they were the appointed international police force. So this, when of course these cartels cannot have functioned all these decades and to this day without the knowledge and the collaboration of important sectors of the state, of the U.S. State,
including the U.S. banks, actually involved in getting money from the cartels.
Their financial system, the DEA, their justice and police system, without them, they could not have functioned, and different collaborations to this effect in the region are well known. For example, the Plan Colombia against the FARC, where the U.S. Forces have backed the Autodefensas Unidas, the Contra sectors who were financed by drug cartels. So this is pure hypocrisy, of course. But whatever their claims, the political position from the PO and other sectors of the revolutionary left is clear against any U.S. intervention in the region. I think if they advance in this sense, there will be mass demonstrations. There will be a big popular influx against any U.S. presence or regime change attempts in the region. However unpopular the Maduro government effectively is, both in Venezuela itself and in the whole continent, any new action by the U.S. has to be faced with a large level of demonstrations. Of course, both in Argentina and in other countries, this probably has not yet had the response that is necessary, because there is a big level of confusion and attacks on all fronts. So we're facing strong repression from the state and austerity policies. Also, the situations abroad, like in Palestine, with the ongoing genocide, have a strong solidarity movement that's on the streets for that. So it's really a lot of things on the agenda, but I definitely think this is a central point. We have made a clear position on this, and I think if the U.S. tries to really advance along these lines, they're going to find a strong process of radicalization, struggle, and attacks on the presence of the U.S. in the whole continent. these systematic economic crisis of countries like Argentina, we're not a failed state. We're a colonized state. It is not a formal colonization, but it is the foreign debt. It is the presence of multinational companies which control the most important sectors of production, of distribution of services, and our national resources, which are strangling our economy and our society. And like Argentina, this reality is to one extent or another shared by most countries in the region. So an anti-imperialist struggle is actually the only path, and a regional struggle for socialist integration is actually the only path to get out of this situation of permanent impoverishment, permanent destruction of our culture, our public services, and lack of access to our natural resources. Lithium, as you well know, is a very strategic component of the most important technologies of our time. But batteries are not made in Argentina. Electric cars are not made in Argentina, and you know, even cell phones or computers are, in the best of cases, assembled from parts and batteries brought from elsewhere. So you know, this sort of backwards organization of our countries will not be solved without a strong confrontation with imperialism.
And Milei, of course, additionally, has been a major supporter of the genocide in Israel, like Trump. He's gone there and gone to the Wailing Wall, says he's Jewish and a big supporter. Has there been a backlash in Argentina because of his support for the genocide in Gaza?
Well, I'll tell you this. In the past few months, the movement for Palestine has become much more massive. We've, of course, been working for this since the first day. The way that this wave of genocide, you know, as a response to the uprisings of October 7th, has begun. It was just a month before Milei came to power. So the level of repression and persecution, and Milei's siding with Zionism, worked as a strong deterrent against mass demonstrations for Palestine. And many of those who have been first to speak on the issue, like our comrades and other comrades of the left, have faced strong legal persecution because of this. Vanina Biasi is facing a legal case where the fact that she denounces the genocide in terms very similar to those of UN Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, or even the current votes at the UN, has attorneys, district attorneys and state attorneys and judges saying she is an anti-Semite and a racist person that has to be brought to trial. When, of course, socialists have nothing to do with anti-Semitism or any sort of racial discrimination. We're talking about the imperialist colonial enclave that is being upheld through the daily murder of hundreds of men, women, and children. So what's going on now is demonstrations have become much more massive, and you know, 10,000 people at demonstrations, so a much more interest and a lot of different activities in unions and universities and in different areas of the countries have come out in support for Palestine. Of course, artists and other figures of culture. So you know, the situation has started to shift in Argentina, like it has all over the world. Sensitized, of course, by seeing the live daily updates of the genocide, right? The other thing that happened with this is bourgeois opposition, which has been completely siding with Zionism, particularly Peronism. They, for example, under Cristina Kirchner's government, had the country join the HIRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is the one that's being used against Vanina Biasi, Alejandro Bolart of the MST, and other comrades. So, and they've also brought in the Israeli water company Mekorot to control the water works of 11 of the 24 provinces of the country. This happened under Peronism. So they have said nothing, at least the main figures of Peronism, during the 2 years of genocide. And then in these recent meetings of Congress where Milei suffered important defeats, a right-wing politician talked about genocide, and Cristina Kirchner tweeted in support of him. So these sort of bourgeois politicians who have said nothing for 2 years are now starting to differentiate themselves from Milei's policy of complete support for Netanyahu, who's very isolated internationally. And I think these changes in the position of the European countries have also started to shift the local bourgeois politicians. From the PO, what we have proposed to the committee, the Argentine Committee of Solidarity with the Palestinian People, which is the main committee of the Palestinian movement in Argentina, is to demand of Congress that they have to put their money where their mouth is. It's not enough to be sad about the bombings and the genocide. The Argentine Congress has to vote to break diplomatic and commercial relationships with Israel, as the left front has repeatedly proposed, without being accompanied by any of the sectors of the bourgeois opposition, some of whom are now criticizing Netanyahu. It is important to mention on this point, at the same time, that Netanyahu had scheduled a visit to Argentina for this month, which has then been canceled. So this week, Milei has met with Netanyahu, not in Argentina, but in New York. And the reason for this is the growth of the opposition, and that there were many legal cases presented all over the country that a war criminal like Netanyahu should be brought to jail if he is on Argentinian soil. And the Milei government's control of the justice system is incomplete and challenged. So they were not sure if maybe some judge was going to detain Netanyahu if he was on Argentine soil.
Well, unlike the United States, with Trump implementing Project 2025, it seems that Milei has not been able to implement his program. Why don't you go over the different points that Milei programmatically put forward and where those things are at in Argentina?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. In many of the cases, he's even doing the exact opposite of what he said he was going to do. Let's see. He talked about mass layoffs, which to some extent he carried out. He, of course, said, in a traditional liberal discourse, that making the state spending smaller was going to cause a surge in work, jobs in the private sector, and the opposite happened. Actually, more jobs in the private sector were lost than layoffs in the state. Over 200,000 jobs in the private sector were lost with the strong recession that began with the Milei government, as he also shut down, for example, all public works, construction of housing or roads or whatever, as part of his recessive measures. So if we have to measure by this promise of economic development by cutting away at state spending, we're going to see that he did cut state spending. He destroyed wages and budgets in public services, but it has not created jobs. But actually, many companies, private companies and factories, have closed their doors in these 2 years in Argentina, hundreds of them, and over 200,000 jobs been lost. So that's I think a first important point. Then he talked about dollarization. He said that the solution to inflation and permanent devaluation of the Argentine currency, the peso, was going to be to dollarize the economy. But actually, he has maintained for his term thus far many of the restrictions on the possibility of changing pesos for dollars, and he has intervened in the currency market, selling state-owned dollars to try to keep the peso afloat in a repeat of what we've seen in previous governments, basically. And the money he gets from Trump is going to be used in this fashion, where what happens is it's a way of the state to finance how private speculators decide to take the money out of the country when the conditions for the sort of speculative businesses that, or circuits that Milei has set up are starting to look bad. They need to have the state give them the exchange of pesos for dollars necessary to get those dollars out of the country. So it's the state spending a lot of money in setting up very good conditions for finance speculation, and then spending dollars to allow these speculators for their money to leave the country. And we've seen these sort of boom bust speculative cycles come with the De La Rua government, with the Macri government, and Milei even has the same economy minister and the same, and another of the main figures was president of the central bank during the Macri administration. They were also present in the De La Rua administration in 2001. So these are people who have faced criminal charges for the sort of way that they've taken on foreign debt and given it to private investment funds that they also work with when they're not state officers. So this is a main component of the current crisis. And he said that the austerity cuts were going to be against what he calls the political class or the political caste, like Peronism and the functionaries of the different parties. And the reality is, it's been a civil war against poor people, unemployed people, workers, pensioners, the families of disabled people. So even the right-wing media outlets who've been cheering for Milei all this time, after his strong defeats in the past month, they've been trying to sort of show a more social sensitive side. And then they were going to this march of 200,000 people and saying, why are you defending the pediatric hospital? Oh, because they saved my life when I was little. They were doing these sob stories to try to get with the program, in a way, of a country which is rejecting the attack on the living conditions which the Milei policy has put forward. His war against social organizations, with the trial they want to carry out against 15 leaders of the Polo Obrero, for example, unemployed worker piquetero organization, is also been showing its true colors. They said that they had done a state audit of soup kitchens and social organizations, which showed it was some sort of scam where unemployed people were going to eat every day because they don't have enough income to sustain themselves and their families. And they had to admit in a legal case in the last week that they did no such audit of the soup kitchens. They were just doing a political attack and trying to justify a legal persecution of unemployed workers' organizations. But this supposed state auditing of the soup kitchens, when it was asked for in legal terms, the state functionaries had to admit that it did not even exist. So I think this is just a few of the points, but it gives you an idea of how the original discourse, which Milei had attacked with, showed itself to be completely false. And I think the last thing I want to tell you, just to complete this picture, is the corruption charges against the Milei government itself, which have become very big and very repeated and played a big part in their electoral defeat. So they came talking about the corruption of the Peronists, which is true. I mean, the Peronist governments have been very corrupt, and paint themselves as an outsider candidate, and that they come from private enterprise, and which supposedly makes them purer from the previous governments. And the reality is, this whole year we've had one scandal after the other. I'm sure you've seen the Libra cryptocurrency scandal, where Milei promoted what they call a shitcoin. I think it's the term.
It was a shitcoin.
Yeah, it's a very
meme.
A meme coin, they also call them. But so they it's a cryptocurrency.
What happened with that? His sister was skimming off his he publicized it, and then his sister taking this to skimming it.
The legal investigation didn't really continue. They made a parliamentary commission, which is threatening with interviewing people, but it hasn't really advanced. There's been, the justice system has worked to his favor in this sense. But basically, what has come out is his sister charged $1 million fees for private entrepreneurs to meet with Milei and propose different businesses to him, which had to do with using the state as a resource. And one of these was to have this cryptocurrency emitted and promoted by the president. And what happened is, well, he was using the social media accounts of the president to promote this Bitcoin. In 1 hour, they sold all of it, which caused its value to plummet, and scamming millions of dollars from people all over. So there were legal
including
cases
his own
states,
supporters, including his own supporters.
I'm sure if they weren't direct supporters, they were at least usually people sympathetic to his views, because it was a Bitcoin with the slogan of his party. So they calmed them, and more recently, and I was telling you about the the attacks on handicapped people and the strong movement. There's a national agency for dealing with the problems of handicapped people, and the person Milei put in charge there was his personal lawyer, no less. Audios of him sending to another person talking about how Milei's sister and her personal people, or the people who work with her, were asking kickbacks that were too expensive from the private labs. And he said, it's really too much. I came in and they told me to attack all the kickbacks that the parents were asking for. And she's asking for 3% on every purchase made by the state agency for handicapped people over what the previous governments had already been asking for. And this was made public. So it was a big scandal, particularly because they're doing huge cutbacks against the same agency that they're also scamming off of. So this caused, huge outrage, and Milei's campaign appearances after that ended up with him running away from just people who were chasing him, throwing things at him. They can't do public appearances on the campaign trails, mostly in the province of Buenos Aires, without a huge police presence. So this is a sort of situation that has come about, and I think, in particular, the personal corruption charges against him and his sister, who he has placed as a central figure in his government. She's the general secretary of the presidential office, have played a huge role in his political downturn in the last couple of months.
And his support for the techno-fascist Musk with the chainsaw that is supporting Musk doing the same thing in the United States. Seems there's a correlation between these techno-fascists and destroying public services, privatizing the economy. I mean, the Milei government raised that as an international campaign. It seems to have blown up in Argentina. Do you think that will take place internationally with these policies?
Well, yeah. We've discussed this. I think even together, we've put out documents. For example, in the Naples Conference of Internationalists recently, and we discussed there's clearly an ultra-right fascistic current that has taken power in many countries, and in others is trying to set the conditions for taking power in France and in UK and other countries as well. So this is a strong current and a strong danger, which tries to agitate among the working class, among middle sectors, against using a scapegoat in migrants, using a scapegoat in sectors of the oppressed, instead of taking the conclusions of attacking the millionaires and those in power. So Milei has definitely been one of those agitators and one of those who have used the crisis of traditional parties in the political regime for an ultra-right policy which favors millionaires and imperialism. Trump, Bolsonaro, they're part of the same, Netanyahu, they're part of the same club or the same political current. They want fascism. Luckily, they have not been able to quickly and surely conquer the political conditions of fascism in Argentina. And, we haven't had a day without popular demonstrations and popular struggle, even if they've had to face up to the police. They have not been able to defeat the working class, the revolutionary left, even if they've sent the police to raid our offices, or they want to take our comrades to trial, or they arrest militants. They have not been able to dismantle unions or popular organizations or the left parties. So we're very much in the midst of the struggle. We cannot be, say we've already succeeded. We don't, at all. But we are in a hard struggle, and the Milei government is in a big crisis. Trump is today his main point of support in a government which is going downhill, and which even bourgeois sectors in Argentina who are supporting it have been turning their backs to. And I think a defeat of Milei will work internationally to show that these governments are a failure, even for their own capitalist programs, and they're definitely an enemy of working people everywhere. No, so I hope that as we have all been following the popular rebellions in Indonesia, in Nepal, or the general strikes in France and Italy, I hope Argentina will also occupy a similar space. I think the hundreds of thousands on the street a week ago show that there is a popular sentiment building towards this, and probably a new electoral defeat in October, and the dollars Trump is going to give him, which are not going to solve the economic crisis running out fairly quickly, will set the stage for a larger scale of social conflict and strikes and popular demonstrations very soon in Argentina. And as you said, I think a big defeat of Milei will be a blow to this ultra-right current everywhere, and hopefully an example or a reference for the possibility of workers standing up and being and organizing to defeat these ultra-right governments.
And you have a united left front in Argentina. Why don't you talk about what that is, how it's organizing, and why it's growing, how it's growing, and the political significance of that for the Argentinian working class and the unions in Argentina?
Since 2011, we've had a left front in Argentina, which, unlike many electoral formations of the left internationally, is for workers' government, is linked to organizing in the class struggle and direct action, and is not a part of any sort of political blocs with bourgeois forces. So it's very far from the popular frontism of organizations like the PSOL in Brazil, which is part of the Lula government, or in general, the French MPA, which split under the pressure to side with social democrats and petty bourgeois sectors like Mélenchon and so on. The left front is politically independent from Peronists and in general from all bourgeois sectors, and it is linked to the class struggle. We have different political positions on many points. We have many discussions between the parties and organizations which make up the left front, but it's been over a decade where the left front in Argentina is a channel for electoral and parliamentary politics of the revolutionary left, acting as a united bloc against bourgeois forces. So I think this is an important achievement. It's an important instrument of the vanguard of the working class in Argentina, which and what happens is the revolutionary left, which is Trotskyist organizations, is the left in Argentina and is identified as a separate bloc from bourgeois forces. So when Milei showed that he was not an outsider of capitalist politics, but another new version, recycling even old officials of the same corrupt bourgeois parties, the revolutionary left started growing electorally again in working class areas of the province of Buenos Aires in the recent elections. So I think this shows the importance of occupying this space for revolutionary politics and the possibilities of it. Also, as we were discussing before, without the parliamentary revolutionary leaders of the Workers' Party and the Left Front, the denouncing of Zionism and imperialism would have no public reference points in Argentina. We've been instrumental, even bourgeois Arab forces, even the Palestinian embassy or the Arab League, and bourgeois forces like this have to recognize that without the revolutionary left in Argentina, nobody would be denouncing Zionism because all the bourgeois forces are under the pay and pressure of Zionism. So I think it's an important instrument. It cannot, of course, electoral and parliamentary politics will not defeat the bourgeois forces, nor be the channel for a workers' government. And we are building working class organization in the neighborhoods, in the unions, and in the student movement, and in the women's movement, and so on, because this has to be the channel forward. But I think my feeling as a militant, and that of many here, is that we have suffered through the worst of the very concentrated attack by the state and the bosses to try to crush working class organization, and that an opportunity is starting to open up with the political crisis of the Milei regime, and which we'll be able to start organizing a strike back. But even in the moments of very intense attack by the government, we've had strikes and mobilizations of up to 1 million people, which I think expresses a level of organization, of opposition to the government, and of working class independent organization, which is strong, in relative terms. Yesterday night, I was up till 1 a.m. With the comrades of the SUTNA, of the Tire Workers Union, who in a year where they've had very tough conflicts with hundreds of layoffs, occupying factories, striking factories, making pickets, but under very difficult conditions, they haven't been able to resist all the level of attacks by the bosses. So the trade union bureaucracy and the companies were financing many opposition ballots in the union to try to push the class struggle leadership linked to the PO out of the union. And I want to tell you that with over 46% of the vote last night, our comrade Alejandro Crespo was again voted as the equivalent of president of the Tire Workers Union, which is the main industrial union led by the left in Argentina. So they've definitely been trying to use the Milei moment as an international media darling, the support of imperialism and big companies to destroy leftist organization in the unions and the working class. But we're happy to say they are not succeeding. 2 months ago, we did a national meeting of 1,000 leaders of unions, unemployed workers movement, and pensioners, which voted a common plan of action, which has been an important part of the reaction against the Milei government, his vetoes on working class demands in Congress, and his attacks on the public services. And it's playing an important part in calling on demonstrations of thousands of workers, coordinating radical and left forces in the labor movement. So that's a bit of what we're doing, and I think the importance it has in the struggles that are upcoming in Argentina.
And of course, in 1976, there was a military coup supported by the United States, not only the US government, but the AFL-CIO, which supported the overthrow of the government in Argentina. Why don't you talk about the role of the AFL-CIO in Argentina? Because most American workers are unaware of the fact that the AFL-CIO worked with the CIA, gets $70 million a year from National Endowment for Democracy, USAID. that may end because of the shutdown of those agencies. But the history is that, of course, the AFL-CIO was intimately involved in trying to overthrow the left and support a military government in Argentina.
Yeah, the AFL-CIO and their international aid programs were very active, particularly in the 60s and early 70s in Argentina, trying to isolate the more radicalized sectors of the labor movement and promoting and strengthening the ranks of business unionism and the leaders of trade union bureaucracy who identified as Peronists and were part of the Peronist movement, but who, as part of the strategy of Peronism, were also part of trying to maintain, the social peace in agreement with the military dictatorships of those years. So there's a lot of documentation on the thousands and thousands of dollars that got sent to them to build up an infrastructure, and for the private wealth of those union leaders as well, to promote union leaders that would be friendly to the U.S. embassy and to U.S. interests in the regions, and to isolate radical working class tendencies like what is known in Argentina as the clasista sectors, the class struggle sectors in the unions. So, I know I've sent you some documentation, some books that mention findings on this intervention over the years in Argentina of the AFL-CIO, trying to intervene within the Argentine labor movement. And it's important to note that these sectors of the Peronist trade union bureaucracy organized hit squads against left militants within the labor movement in the early 70s, what was known as the AAA, which would be Anti-Communist Argentine Alliance, which was a hit squad against leftist militants in the labor movement, which later folded into the hit squads of the military dictatorship once it came to power. The PO, have even as recently as 2010 had one of our militants in the midst of a conflict for equal pay and equal labor contract in the railway lines close to the city of Buenos Aires, had one of our militants, Mariano Ferreira, assassinated by Peronist trade union bureaucracy hit squad. So this sort of modus operandi, this sort of way of functioning has been maintained in the trade union bureaucracy to this day, and the AFL-CIO contributed to consolidating this deeply pro-business, integrated into the state version of trade union leadership in Argentina.
And the Peronist union leadership, does the United Left Front that you have fight in a way united in the unions against this Peronist leadership in the unions? And have they been forced to the left? You say that they've joined some of these strikes because of pressure in the working class. Maybe you can talk about that relationship.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's contradictory. In some unions, we manage a coordinated effort between all left parties or organizations, including those belonging to the left front. But there are definitely many cases where some organizations prioritize, factionalism, infighting, or fighting for the place of their own organizations instead of united front work in defense of all unions recovered from the bureaucracy. So that's something we in the PO are very critical of. For example, in the election last night in the SUTNA, some sectors of the left sided with apolitical ballots sustained by some of the companies against the left-wing leadership of the SUTNA. So we think this sort of factionalist maneuvering is completely against the interest of the working class. Marx said communists have no interest of their own organization above the general interests of the working class. This rule sadly does not apply from some of the organizations, as the MST or the Nuevo Mas, who yesterday in a union led by class struggle sectors sided with these sort of pro-business oppositions. So sadly, I can't say that we always work together because there are these sort of problems. But in a general sense, almost all sectors of the left participated in this sort of general coordination of class struggle unions and working class movements that was set up 2 months ago. And many anti-bureaucratic slates in the unions integrate many sectors of the left, or all of the sectors of the left working together in those unions. This is sometimes, we can point to positive examples in this sense in many unions, as well as this problem I pointed out in the tire workers union. And what happens is the trade union bureaucracy is deeply institutionalized and is against progressive plans of strikes, is against direct action. And even when it criticizes the government, basically what it does is try to negotiate in its favor the points which have to do with it maintaining its apparatus, being able to collect dues from its members, being able to control the budget of the health works of their union, which the state has to authorize. And if those sort of points are agreed to, then points that have to do with layoffs, points that have to do with downturns in wages are accepted by this trade union leadership. So what we've had the past, particularly in the last year, the first year of the Milei government, they thought their structure might be threatened by the Milei government, and they called for some strikes and demonstrations against the government, though very spaced out over time. And in the last year, they've done nothing, basically. Even on many street demonstrations, people chant, "Where is the CGT?" That nobody sees it, which is the trade union federation. So we've had to invent ways to call all workers to demonstrate without the trade union federation calling it. One of the big demonstrations last year was called by football fans, because there was a video of Diego Maradona before he died saying, if you let police attack a retired guy, an old retired guy, you're a coward. And many local football fans came out, and this ended up after 2 or 3 times that the police attacked both the retired, pensioners and the football fans. One big day, there was like almost 80,000 people fighting with the police last year. So it has not been the Peronist trade unions that have been a center of the demonstrations against the government in general. I think the big change in the last demonstration was that Peronists had a big win against Milei in the local elections in September of the province of Buenos Aires. And towards the elections in October, I think they've tried to make the unions integrate themselves into the demonstration, which was going to be important anyway, and to try to control it so it takes political support to them in the next election. So I think it's to a certain point a maneuver, and of course, as you say, also a reflection of the desire and decision of many workers inside those unions that they want to be on the street against the government. So what are we doing? We go to assemblies in our unions and say we have to go in a plan of action against the government. We have to defeat the government if we want to be able to fight for better wages, if we want to be able to fight against layoffs and for our job stability. We have to have a government that's not trying to destroy working class conditions. Milei, on the other hand, is talking about a labor reform, which Peronist trade union bureaucracy leaders say they agree to a labor reform in principle, but we'd have to see what labor reform we are talking about. Cristina Kirchner has said herself, there has to be some labor reform. So I think it's going to be a big struggle in the unions as well. It's been a difficult time because when you have mass layoffs, it is difficult. It can generate some resistance, or pullback in the rank and file of going into actions. But I think there's a growing clarity that being on the defensive will get us nowhere, and that we have to have the working class come out and defeat the Milei government. And for us, it's very clear, and our campaign on this is very clear. The general strike is the tool that we have to defeat the government. The elections will not change the real relationship of forces. It will just be one element. We need the working class on the streets and in the workplaces. We need a general strike. So it's the workers who defeat the Milei government, and it's us workers who will prepare the conditions for the coming political period.
And at the conference in Naples, and also there was a international conference in Zurich, Zimmerwald too, calling for a united front against fascism and imperialist war. How do you see the development of an international, current international organization against fascism and imperialist war? The fascist supporters internationally are quite organized. They have a lot of money. Musk and Trump welcome the AfD. They welcome fascist governments. In fact, they're attacking the social democratic governments or liberal Christians in Europe, and saying that they need a fascist solution, that they should go to the right and set up fascist parties and fascist governments in Europe. How do you see forming and developing an international united front against fascism and imperialist war?
I think we need to unite internationalists, and we need to unite them on a clarity, both programmatic and of common action. I think we need to be together against imperialist war, like we're already seeing in Ukraine, like we're seeing in the genocide in Palestine, which is trying to reform the Middle East under the plans of the US. Mostly to make a great Israel as a platform for their military attacks against their enemies. So this is showing us a tendency towards a world war, and we need to regroup the internationalist revolutionary left. And I think, meetings like the ones we've had in Buenos Aires and in Naples have been interesting steps in that direction, also because they have not been sectarian in their nature, but open up to a debate and to voting on some common actions and some common initiatives. So I think this is methodologically the way to go. I think this is also the way to fight against the ultra-right governments, who are a big part of the war drive, of course, as well. But I think we cannot limit this sort of internationalist union to being against the ultra-right at all, because we've seen the Biden administration, Starmer of the Labour Party in UK, and those same Social Democrats that you were mentioning be a big part of the military buildup in Europe, the rearm Europe, being a big part of the war in Ukraine, being sustaining Netanyahu as Biden did through all his terms. So I think we have to be against all sectors of bourgeois governments and imperialism, and we have to be very clear. The fascistic ultra-right is a very dangerous enemy. We have to concentrate our forces against it with the united front of working class organizations and the method of direct action of the general strike. This is how we are facing against them in Argentina to the best of our forces, and we hope this current will grow. We've seen the brave people of Los Angeles fighting against the ICE raids, and hope that the labor movement and the activists and organizations and working class people in the US will stand up against the militarization of their cities and against deportations and attacks like the ones we're seeing in the US. And we think this is the method internationally, and we have to be very clear. It is not a problem of choosing the lesser evil. Political blocs with bourgeois sectors are not the answer to these ultra-right attacks, to these fascistic attacks. We have to defeat them on the streets. So that's we have to go to the general strike. So definitely, and I think we're going to agree on this. It's the working class united front which is going to stand up against the fascists and the far right. So I think we need an internationalist force which is clear on this political line in the working class.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with Guillermo Kane. He is a professor at the University of Buenos Aires, a member of the Workers' Party, the PO, and was a parliamentary member from the province of Buenos Aires, and is in the middle of a struggle now in Argentina with workers, trade unionists, and his supporters against Milei. And Milei is on the defensive now in Argentina. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.